Hello and welcome to Lyra Nara, and in today's video we are going to talk about the magic of sulfur, sunlight and water and what they mean for our lives, how we can maintain our system in a healthy state by adding the right amount of sulfur, sunlight and the right kind and amount of water to our system. And before we do all of that and get much more in depth on that topic, I would like, of course, to wish you all Happy New Year 2019. I hope that you've entered it well and that it's going to be a great year for all of us. And of course, we here at Lyra Nara in 2019 as well, we're gonna help you stay and become healthy in a natural way with all of the educational material that we're gonna bring out weekly so that you can make the right decisions. Again, Happy New Year, and without further ado, let's dive right in and learn more about the magic of sulfur, sunlight and water. So let's start this by asking ourselves, why are we so sick today actually? And the reasons are manifold, of course. One of the more important ones is that we are poisoning ourselves with toxic chemicals that are contained within our food. They destroy our gut, then the liver, then the kidneys, and finally our heart and the brain also become affected by this toxicity. The toxic metals also unfortunately work synergistically with glyphosate, which is the ingredient used in the very popular herbicide Roundup, that harms us further profoundly. Then we take too many drugs that make things also worse by disrupting essential biological pathways, and as a result, as we all know, we develop many painful and debilitating chronic illnesses. But what is happening at the cellular level? Well, the cells that are deficient in cholesterol sulfate can't recycle their garbage and accomplish properly the cellular repair functions which they have to perform. So then the cells have only two options left. The first option is to proliferate in order to dilute this garbage, which means generating cancer. Or the second option they have is cell death and letting the macrophages clean up the mess. If the macrophages also become sick, the result is that the proliferation is the only option, so leads to cancer. Prostate cancer cells produce cholesterol sulfate, for example. Breast cancer cells produce estrogen sulfate, substitute for cholesterol sulfate. The neurons also in the brain clear the cellular debris while we sleep, and they depend upon sulfate to do this. Circadian signals are more important than food or exercise for wellness also. Wellness is about optimized circadian signal specificity and sensitivity, and a healthy circadian rhythm depends again on sulfate. Sleep disorders are also associated with depression, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, Parkinson's, ADHD, MS and autism. And so the circadian signals and the proper working is crucial for not developing this kind of disorders. Next, let's talk about a so-called electric body. Water collaborates with sunlight to support the essential biological processes in your body, such as the blood circulation, homeostasis, ATP energy generation, and detoxification. Our body is an electrical body, similar to the whole universe actually, so biochemical and biophysical processes are all initiated and maintained by an electric potential. And there is an external electricity, our blood vessels, and an internal electricity supply for each cell that is secured by the cell's cytoskeleton. And the cytoskeleton is responsible for the cell's motility, movement of organelles and vesicles through the cytoplasm, cytokinesis, establishment of the intracellular organization of the cytoplasm, also establishment of cell polarity, and many other functions that are essential for cellular homeostasis and survival. And as the cytoskeleton is so important, let's learn more about it. The cytoskeleton accomplishes all of its tasks through three basic structures. First one being 7 to 8 nanometers diameter microfilaments composed of actin, then 10 nanometers intermediate filaments built of myosin with cell-specific composition, and then the 24 nanometer diameter microtubules composed of tubulin dimers. And the cytoskeleton is a dynamic structure where the three major filaments and tubules are under the influence of proteins that regulate their length, polymerization, and level of cross-linking. Members also of the myosin family move vesicles along actin microfilaments with specific directionality, whereas members of the kinesin or KRP and dynein families move the cargo along microtubule tracks and play central roles in the formation and function of the mitotic spindle. And both forms of translocation require ATP hydrolysis. The contraction caused by the interaction of myosin heads with the actin filaments also derives its energy from this ATP hydrolysis. Next, let's explore the connection between the cytoskeleton and so-called structured water. Cells maintain around them what is called structured water, and this structured water is in a jellified state. Protons are made available by the structured water and are used by the lysosomes to reach the very acidic pH to be able to destroy and cleanse the cellular debris. And the mitochondria need an acidic milieu on the outside membrane with a pH of 6.8 and a more basic pH of 7.8 on the inside membrane in order to create the ATP energy. And this is also secured by this so-called structured water. The free electrons that are left after sending protons to the cytoskeleton are used to oxidize sulfur and generate the sulfate ion charges that the cells decorate themselves with these sulfate ions then, and the cholesterol sulfate is the major repairing substance for all cellular damages. Sulfate ions also maintain the structured water and is one of the suppliers of oxygen to the cells, same as the hemoglobin. And the sulfate ions are produced in the skin under the influence of sunlight. And that's why we need sunlight in order to remain healthy. And here you can see again in the picture on the left that structured water is a special gel form of water, not quite liquid and not quite solid. It induces a charge separation and then ships the protons into the cell along the cytoskeleton and uses the electrons to make sulfate in the membrane, and therefore sulfate is essential for maintaining this gel. What about the red blood cells then in the capillaries? Well, the red blood cells are negatively charged due to the SO4 ions and flow through vessels without friction, being repelled by the capillary inside walls that are negatively charged. And while they are floating through the capillaries, the red blood cells shade their negative charges, thus the venal blood is always positively charged. The outside of the capillary, the walls are charged positively on the outside of the capillary, and between the arteries, which are minus charge, and the veins, which are plus charge, there is an electric potential which keeps the blood circulating. And the blood circulation drives the heart through its valve system, and this potential induces nitric oxide release, which relaxes the blood vessels, and thus the blood vessel cannot collapse. And the more, therefore, sulfate you have and structured water, the better the cellular oxygenation is going to be. Also very important to understand is cholesterol sulfate, because cholesterol sulfate supplies the oxygen, the cholesterol, the energy and the negative charges to all of the tissues. The endothelial nitric oxide synthesis, the eNOS for short, performs the magic job of signaling either the nitric oxide or and the sulfate synthesis depending on the cellular needs, and the skin is literally acting as a solar powered battery. Unfortunately, these so-called eNOS are very vulnerable. So eNOS again is a cytochrome P450 enzyme, is highly vulnerable to various environmental toxins like mercury, aluminum, glyphosate and others. Sulfate makes cholesterol water soluble and therefore easier to transport. And the eNOS synthesis depends on cobalamin, which is vitamin B12 and cobalt. Also heme, iron, sulfur, zinc and oxygen. Also glutathione, but also sunlight. Tryptophan, which converts the UV to blue light and is a source of NAD. And therefore all of these ingredients, all of these substances should be taken also and considered as supplements that you must secure. And sulfate, unfortunately nowadays, is vastly underappreciated. Sulfate is the fourth most abundant anion in the blood, and it protects the blood from coagulation, but it also detoxifies drugs, food additives and toxic metals. It's an essential component of the extracellular matrix protein that exists throughout the tissues and the vasculature. The cerebroside sulfate is also a major constituent of myelin sheets surrounding the axons in the neurons, and without sulfate your lymphatic as well as your circulatory system cannot function. Sulfate biomolecules are sulfated mucopolysaccharides, steroid sulfates, phenol sulfates, tyrosine sulfate, bilirubin sulfate, arylamine sulfates, choline sulfate in lichens, fungi and marine algae, as well as sulfolipids. Next, let's talk about what kind of conditions you can develop if you do not secure enough sulfur and structured water and all of the other ingredients that we talked about. Well, the circadian signals are more important than food or exercise for wellness, as we've mentioned already. And wellness is about an optimized circadian signal specificity and sensitivity. So the healthy circadian rhythm depends on sulfate, as we've discussed shortly already, and the sleep disorders that are associated with depression, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson, etc., and multiple sclerosis or autism, they all stem from unhealthy circadian rhythms. Many neurological diseases have in common also the insufficient supply of sulfate to the brain. The neurological diseases are a result of an enhanced toxic metal exposure such as aluminum or mercury due to their impaired ability to detoxify the brain. The toxic metals interfere with sulfate synthesis, and this results in accumulation of cellular debris, including damaged mitochondria. The heparan sulfate in the lysosomes is critical for recycling cellular debris in the brain, and the heparan sulfate deficiency leads to autism. Heparan sulfate is also produced in the third brain ventricle. The pineal gland delivers also melatonin sulfate to the third ventricle, and from there it diffuses to the cerebrospinal fluid. And the key purpose of melatonin is to deliver sulfate to the neurons at night, and the pineal gland then produces sulfate by day. When it responds to sunlight actually, and it stores it in the heparan sulfate molecules. Aluminum accumulation in the pineal gland disrupts sulfate supplies to the brain, And unfortunately, we live in an age of aluminum, so to speak. So aluminum nanoparticles are present everywhere. They are highly destructive for the brain. They destroy the mitochondria and they severely deplete the ATP in the brain, and therefore they induce autophagy and programmed cell death. They also increase the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. All right, and with all that being said, we come maybe to the most important question. So how can we then stay healthy? Are there devices and supplements out there that can help us? And the short answer is yes, gladly they are. So let's talk about them. The body synthesizes the sulfate from the sulfite in the skin, utilizing the energy that is delivered by the sunlight. And therefore, to stay healthy, you must first maintain a high concentration of sulfur ingested with the food. For example, cruciferous legumes are great for that. But also you must get out into the sunlight several hours per day. If this is not possible due to your lifestyle, which is the case for many of us, then you can use the IceFit 915 or the Magic Laserdisc USB 315, which deliver a fantastic sunlight beam with a primordial clean natural sunlight spectrum for daylight and sunset light. Both devices support melatonin and sulfate synthesis, and they secure their transportation to the cells. The links to both of those devices and the other ones we're going to talk about are going to be, of course, as always, in the description box below for you. And to enhance and correct the cellular electrical potential and increase the membrane permeability, as well as support oxygen and sulfate transportation, and not to forget ATP synthesis and detoxification, we can use these great systems called the Veget Balance Home and Veget Balance Sphere Pro. Galvanic systems, they work really wonders for that kind of a purpose. Fourth, we should take regularly supplements, of course, that contain sulfur, such as MSM and preferably SDS. Fifth, we must hydrate ourselves well and consume only energized and structured water to form the jelly water clusters that we talked about around our cells. Here, two great devices are the Aquatone Advanced and the Aquatone Professional. They are both very suitable tools for structuring the water in your body within minutes. And last but not least, we must supplement abundantly with vitamin D3, iron, manganese, zinc, cobalt, in order to secure enough sulfate and the necessary electrical potential to support a healthy body. And with all that being said, I hope that you've enjoyed this information. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. shop@lyranara.com. I'm also going to post the complete contact information, including our toll-free phone number, in the description box below for you. We love to hear from you, and we love to advise you and help you choose the right tools and the right supplements that work just best for you. And if you've enjoyed this presentation, also please do not forget to support our work by liking, sharing and subscribing. And until next time, stay healthy.